Lindy Buddhis. I am a South African-born designer working in Singapore, and on this side I make language videos on YouTube. You can find me at Lindy Buddhis. Today I'm so excited to share with you two of my passions in life, which is design and languages, and I hope you enjoy the presentation. Today I'm going to be talking about app design for the world, considering scripts, languages, and digital literacy in design. So Polyglot Conference is a little different this year. I'm speaking to you pre-recorded. So if we were here on stage in person, I would have loved to ask you, how many keyboards do you have on your phone? I feel like this is a very polyglot problem, a relatable issue that we have so many keyboards on our phone. Here's my example on the left. And this is a tweet of mine that multiple people retweeted, which I think means a lot of people can relate, that I think I've spent so much time, so many minutes of my life switching between keyboards because I'm accidentally typing in the wrong language. Google Keyboard recently decided it was a good idea to combine the French, Afrikaans, and Hungarian keyboards that I have on my phone into one. This means when I'm writing in Afrikaans, sometimes my words get like a mesh of French. This is a message I sent to my mom on WhatsApp. And I wanted to say, jy kan op WhatsApp inzoom, meaning you can zoom in on WhatsApp. And JY in Afrikaans, jy, turned to J in French. And when I was typing interessant, to be interesting, it became interessante in French. So I've just given up saying, well, I'm just going to have to live with this problem of multiple keyboards and my languages mixing together. And I think a lot of us can relate. But it's not always a bad thing. It can actually be beneficial to be able to write in multiple languages when we are interacting on the internet, when you take into account character count. So in English, the word house has 5 characters. It takes up 5 blocks, 5 spaces. It is House. But in Chinese, the character for house, jia, takes up 1 character count. So you can see you can actually write the word house 5 times in Chinese and only take up the space that the one word of house has in English. I tested this on Twitter. Twitter has a 280 character count limit. So I wrote the same tweet in English, and then I wrote exactly the same thing in Chinese. Over here is the counter of showing you how much space you have left to write your tweet. In English, these sentences took up just a little over half the space, so I could write a few sentences more, and then it would cut me off. Whereas in Chinese, exactly the same thing just took up a quarter of it. So, hello everyone, all of those characters are just 大家好, 3 characters in Chinese. So I think Chinese gets 1 point here for being efficient, and you can actually tweet more. So on the note of character count, the World Wide Web Consortium, W3C, is a wonderful resource for designers to consider when creating a more accessible and multilingual internet. They came up with this diagram that I found that shows how much space, what is the ratio of character count that each language takes up. So they used English as the base, the word views, like maybe video views on YouTube. The Korean takes up 0.8 amount of that word space, whereas the Italian takes up 3 times the amount of space. So this is something that designers can keep in mind, that when you design for different languages, you need to consider how much space each language takes up. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Lindy, and I am a UI UX designer based in Singapore. UI UX design, the UI stands for user interface, and the UX stands for user experience. In a nutshell, UI UX designers design the screens or the interfaces of things that you interact with, maybe a mobile website, an app, a desktop website, or even something like your smartphone or your smartwatch, rather, or an ATM machine. We design all of those screens and how you interact with them to complete a task. We are kind of like the bridge between engineers and developers who design the logic that makes the service or the website work, and us who help put that visual layer on top of it so that users who interact with it can complete a task. Currently, I work at a Singaporean property search startup. I'm helping design the website as well as the Android and iOS apps. Before that, I was working in South Africa on projects varying from chatbots in the beauty industry to mobile money and banking apps across Pan-African markets, as well as telecommunications apps that span across different languages and countries. And this is really where my interest in the intersection of languages and design began. My hobby outside of design is language learning, and recently I've been looking for ways to bridge the two. Creating interfaces that are easily understandable, not only visually from a design perspective, but also linguistically through language or maybe digital literacy, is very crucial, but not easy. I've noticed that there is such a need in the world to create these interfaces and apps that people can understand through different lenses of cultural and digital literacy. So that's what I'm going to be talking about today. And for the sake of brevity, I'm only going to focus on the mobile world. The majority of the world's internet users are mobile-based. Mobile internet traffic has gone up 222% in the last 7 years, and millions of people are becoming internet users every single day. It is estimated that by 2025, 72% of people who use the internet will do so from a mobile device. Many countries who are becoming digitized much later do not really have access to laptops, and they are very mobile first. You might have a smartphone, but not a laptop, and this is your main way of accessing the internet and apps. That means more than ever, designing understandable and easy to use apps and mobile websites is so important. So I'll specifically be looking today at how apps can better support a global and multilingual audience. Let's take a look at how various languages approach app design. We are going to start in Japan, and we're going to compare the English version of the yahoo.com mobile website and the Japanese version on the right. You can immediately see that the Japanese version is a lot more crowded than the English one, right? Maybe this is because a Western English audience might have shorter attention spans. We prefer short, snappy titles. We want to get the job done quickly. Whereas Japanese consumers really want to see everything at once. They want to have a way to make an informed decision and really see the value that a website can give them. If we look at the menus on Yahoo, you can see that the English menu is very brief and high level. The Japanese menu is actually so long that it takes multiple scrolls to get to the end of the menu. It's also categorized alphabetically. Here is ka, the first consonant of the Japanese alphabet, and sa. So everything that starts with a k or a g sound is put under this menu. So kurashi is living, or geimu is games, or gensaku is search. So everything here is in Yahoo. It includes stuff from real estate to games to the weather, payment portals, a calendar, flight booking, and astrology. You can really do everything at once on the Japanese version, but not really on the English version. Another example is the Cosme Japanese app versus the Revlon makeup app. Both of these are cosmetics and makeup apps. However, it has been tested and proven in Japanese mobile and app design that the audience prefers pages that have more information so that they can make upfront decisions and see everything. Western web design is more about letting the user explore and find things for themselves. So the menu is a lot smaller and it's hidden away. Whereas in the Japanese version, the menu is sitting up here with your calendar, your points, a Q&A, all of the sections of the beauty app you need. All of these busy interfaces that I see in Japan, that when I lived in Japan, I felt so overwhelmed by all the information I'm seeing, but it really comes through in the Japanese society. people want to see things up front. So think of these plastic or wax food that you see in Japanese storefronts. It was always fascinating for my family and I to look at these foods and be like, wow, this looks delicious. Let's go and try that. Or these chirashi flyers that they give out with the morning newspaper, which show you all of the specials. They are so information dense and crowded. And from a young age, Japanese audiences, consumers, have trained their eyes to be able to scan through many, many bits of information before making a decision. And you can see how this has even impacted their app and web design. Let's move on to Chinese apps. On the left here, we have an app that is for like ebooks or storybooks or Chinese manga. And it's very girly, so I'm in the section for women here. There's also a male section on the app. And because I mentioned earlier, Chinese characters take up a lot less space, you can actually fit a lot in the screen. You have a space for ads, you have all of your menu sections that you can access, and then all of the top 10 ebooks in the last 24 hours that have been trending. And most of the titles fit in here. However, when we look at Blinkist, which is an English language app for ebook snippets, you can see that some of the English titles have actually been cut off. The titles are just too long to fit into the screen. So maybe the designer could consider a different layout where maybe the image is small on the left and the title is long on the right side. There's many different ways to lay out content according to the language. On the right here, we have another app with traditional Chinese. And because Chinese, one character or one word takes up one space, you can actually stack it from top to bottom. So this is an app where people can write stuff, maybe poetry or prose or their thoughts. And it really has this beautiful design where the characters are stacking on top of each other and you have plentiful white space here. This is something that we can't really achieve when using Latin alphabets, because imagine this title with English stacking one letter on top of each other. It's really just not readable. Another adventure I want to take us onto is the Oirat language. It is spoken in Mongolia, Russia, China, and Kyrgyzstan. It is written, one of the written forms is Torobishig or Toroscript, and it is also called clear script. This is a way to write the Oirat language, and it was created in 1648 by an Oirat Buddhist monk for the language, based on the original Mongolian script, with the goal of distinguishing all the sounds in the spoken language. It's written from top to bottom and from left to right. So how then might we design apps or interfaces using this script? Well, from my research on Wikipedia, you can see that the language is not actually well supported. In fact, it goes over the English and it doesn't fit in the text box here. And the language is endangered, so there are not many apps that use it. But I was so excited when I found a developer who was creating an Android text input for this language. Surak Development, he created this, and you can see all of his code base on GitHub as well if you're interested. What was the most interesting part for me is, if you think about buttons, usually on our interfaces, they are sitting at the bottom and they are horizontal. These buttons have actions that we can tap on. But when using the clear script or the Todo script, the buttons are actually stacked vertically on the right side of the screen. Isn't that fascinating? Also, look at the typing cursor. It's not vertical, but it is horizontal. I found that really interesting. So going further, investigating into Mr. Surak's GitHub page, I found that they were designing components based on Google's material design standard. Material design is a design system created by Google that standardizes interface elements. For example, this is a dialog box. In app design, a dialog box gives you more information before making an action. Maybe, do you want to accept or cancel this thing that you're about to do? Now, if we put this dialog box component in the Todo script, you can see that it's actually changing. It's standing on top. It's not horizontal, but it is vertical. And the OK or the cancel, I don't know how to read this language, unfortunately, the main button is sitting here at the bottom right. Another material design component is the toast. It's like a little notification that pops up like a toast. So in Android material design, here's an example of a toast in English. Do you want to maybe undo your action? Whereas in the Todo script, the toast is sitting like this. It's not a elongated pill, but it is sitting upright. Moving on to Booking.com. This is a website that is available in multiple languages, and I had such a fun time clicking around and translating the page to see how the different components are organized based on the language. Estonian is much, much longer than English, so it took up a lot more space. Focusing just on the mobile app, however, let's look at the menu at the top here. In English, on a smaller screen, pretty much everything can fit in except airport taxis that is cut off. On a bit of a bigger cell phone screen, you can fit everything here in English. So all of the main navigational tabs fit in one screen. However, in Hungarian, it is so long that you have to scroll through this tab bar to get to where you want to be. If you want airport taxis, you have to scroll all the way to the end just because the words in this language are so long. And that I mentioned before in Chinese, the characters take up a lot less space. So the Booking.com menu in Chinese actually has a lot of space to play with. There's a lot of blank space because of the language. I live in Singapore, which is very close to Indonesia, and Indonesia has one of the biggest super apps in the world called Gojek. Gojek started out as a transport app where you could book a taxi, but has since extended into food delivery, ticket purchases, parcel deliveries. You can order massages. It's amazing. It is really an all-in-one app. 1 in 2 people in Indonesia have the Gojek app, and it has more than 125 million downloads. So what makes this app so successful? Well, not only if we consider a mobile-first market such as Indonesia, who focuses on saving data on their phone or space, it's a lot easier to download one app that can do more things rather than downloading multiple apps, right? On top of that, there is the language layer. And I'm really impressed by the writers at Gojek, who have created this app that feels very familiar to users. They've done their research to see how do people in the area really talk. The app is available in Bahasa Indonesia, which is the Indonesian language. There are multiple languages in Indonesia, but this is the main standard language that most people can understand. Over here, it says something quite casually like, oh yeah, it seems like the internet is down, instead of something like, no connection. Then it says, please check your Wi-Fi connection and then try again, yeah? Like, you can do that, yeah? Try again, yeah? So it's got this very informal, casual feel that makes someone who's using the app feel like, oh, this is relatable, this is relevant, this is how we talk in daily life. And I really think this is a little part of why Gojek is so successful. Then they had a challenge of coming to Singapore. So Singapore has multiple languages. English, Malay, Tamil, and Chinese are the official languages of Singapore. And there's also a lot of dialects like Hokkien, Hakka, Teochew, a number of Indian languages as well. And it's just a very linguistically diverse country. So where Gojek in Indonesia could say, okay, we're going to standardize this app into Bahasa Indonesia and most people will understand it, they had a bit of a challenge coming to Singapore. And I read an article from a UX writer at Gojek saying all of the research they were doing in Singapore to find something that is truly Singaporean. What is one thing that can bridge these language barriers and really connect all Singaporeans? And the thing they came up was Singlish. And I agree, Singlish is a wonderful, uniquely Singaporean thing that I actually mentioned in my talk at Polyglot conference last year, how unique and entertaining Singlish is because it combines multiple languages into one. It's like a very casual, quick way of saying things. So when I opened the GoCheck app in Singapore, I was pleasantly surprised to see the use of Singlish in the app. They said here, wait getting ready on the loading screen. Now, putting at the end of a word is kind of like a Singlish casual way to soften something. Not many people, when speaking Singlish, say, please wait. They say, wait I get to now, wait So by using this language element in the app, I felt, oh, wow, this is a really local app, or I feel really connected to the app. And that's something that I found very exciting when using it. I also recently spoke to a UX writer who is based in Singapore, and he was emphasizing how you really cannot just use Google Translate to translate an app across different markets. The example he gave was if you're using like "onla" as a confirmation, like success, you've completed this button, here's a confirmation. He said that they really need to work, designers need to work with translators to educate them on what they are trying to express, so that you can convey the tone and the mood. There needs to be another local equivalent in a different language. So Google Translate, it doesn't take into consideration these nuances that the language has. So it's really crucial for designers when designing apps to consider what is the tone and the message that they want to convey when creating these apps. I also lived in the United Arab Emirates for 5 years. It was amazing. I remember always being so fascinated that notebooks and magazines were, in my mind, backwards, because Arabic is written from right to left and not left to right. So of course the books are also flipped, right? So how does this translate into app design? Here is an app from the UAE called Property Finder. It's to search for property. If we take exactly the same page of the app and we switch it to the Arabic version, everything becomes mirrored. So where we, in our English brains, will read from left to right, we see the picture first, then the price, or we see the search bar and then the filters to narrow down our search. In Arabic, it starts from the right side of the page. You see your search icon here, and then you read that way. Your filters icon is here, and then you go down the rest, and your main images are on the right. Again, I am a big fan of Google Material Design because of all the robust guidelines that they put in to help designers create apps and interfaces across different languages. Here's an example of something they've shown of how you can translate a page from left to right to RTL, right to left. That includes Arabic or Hebrew. Here's an example of the Airbnb page in Hebrew, for instance, and you can see it's also sitting, everything is kind of nudging towards the right. So what was the most interesting for me here is that the primary button, the main action that someone needs to click on a page, it's usually, this bold, bright button. On English or left to right interfaces, it's sitting on the left, whereas on right to left interfaces, it moves to the right. Progress bars as well. Any movement going from left to right will change from, any movement going from left to right will change to right to left. This also includes icons. Iconography is a language of its own. And when these icons indicate motion, when you are working on a right to left interface, those icons still need to show the same motion. So if I look at this, the first thing I think is, that's the forward button. But if I am looking at a right to left interface in Arabic or Hebrew, for instance, this is the back button. Again, anything that shows motion, maybe this bicycle cycling forwards, also needs to be flipped because he is cycling forwards in another language. Isn't that fascinating? Numbers in Arabic, however, are still written from left to right. So here you can see this person's name has been translated, but his phone number is still that way. There's also another way to write numbers in Arabic apart from these, they are called Arabic numerals, which is confusing, but numbers in Arabic. Those numbers in Arabic also read from left to right. So here's an example of an icon. Maybe it's like on YouTube where you want to rewind to 30 seconds ago. designers should also take into consideration those numbers. How can we translate this icon to Arabic? And this is the number 3 in Arabic, and this dot is a 0. I remember being fascinated by coins in Dubai as a child and looking at the number amount on the coin. And I always thought, why is the 0 a little dot? But that's just how you write the number. The 0 is always a little dot, and the rest of the numbers are bigger. All right, localizing apps for regional languages. Not just main languages, but smaller dialects and languages or bigger languages in the world. So I was attending a talk by Julie Schiller from Google. She is a UX researcher at Google. And she mentioned that there are 10 languages in the world that cover 1.9 billion people. So think if you are creating an app and you translate this app into these 10 languages, you will reach an audience of 1.9 billion people. That's crazy, right? But she said that from her research, a lot of people still tend to have their device in English. Why would that be? Well, for one, English is better supported currently than other languages. Translations are not always accurate, and designers and developers generally start with English as a base. I think it's sad, and we can really work towards creating a more inclusive internet with multiple languages. But she also said that sometimes English is aspirational. People want to be good at English. It's unfortunately, as polyglots, we might not like it, but really English seems to be the lingua franca, right? So somebody, he actually attended the Polyglot conference. I wonder if he spoke last year as well. But anyway, my friend was replying to that tweet I posted. And he said, indeed, most of his Indonesian native speaker friends prefer to keep their devices in English because the translations are just not natural. So I really think that people should do better when designing for multiple languages. A friend of mine works in the Philippines, and he's an app designer working across 3 languages, English, Tagalog, and Bicolano, a regional language of the Bicol region in the Philippines. He said that when he creates a dialogue box, a text box of information, in English, he can get his thoughts across in 1 sentence. In Tagalog, a bit longer, maybe 2 sentences. Whereas in Bicolano, it is, quote, even trickier. Bicolano is a syllabic language, and syllables are repeated to signify different parts of a sentence and tenses. That means that words can become very long. I don't speak Bicolano, but you can see here that please speak slowly in English is very, very, very long when translated to Bicolano. So just imagine this in an app screen. Quite tricky to design for apps that have so much language content. But that does not mean we should ignore or avoid them. My same friend, Ralph Filio, he was saying that living in a city where people speak 3 languages, it really matters, and it pays off to be culturally sensitive to your target market. And he went on to say, even though it is difficult to do the translation work, it pays off. So one of the apps he was working on is specifically for housewives in the Bicol region who might not know English. And that is a big part of their target market. And it is an important audience to consider, even though it might be tricky. All right, the last aspect I want to touch on is accessibility, copy, so words, changing word, and also how do screen readers work on apps. First, let's discuss digital literacy. Simply put, someone who is digitally literate can find and evaluate information on a digital platform. An example is maybe understanding how to do a Google search, how to use Google Maps, or how to send an email. Credit and debit. This is something very interesting that I touched on when I was doing research in South Africa. We were designing a mobile money app. We were improving on somebody's app that they gave us to work on. And they were saying that their user base, they want it to grow. And many of their users are not using the app. So why could that be? We did a lot of research across multiple different countries in Africa. And we found that 75% of users across Uganda, Nigeria, and South Africa had trouble understanding the technical terminology in the app. I'll get to credit and debit now, but other parts of the app were using things like OTP, recharge, top up, merchant shortcode. And even though people who we tested with were literate in multiple language and they knew how to use a smartphone, some of these technical terms was hindering their progress to be able to complete an action on the app. So we tested with them to check their mobile money balance statement, their banking statement on their app. When we saw credit and debit and we saw people struggling to read that, a simple solution we employed was just to change the words to money in and money out. That's exactly what credit and debit means, right? On top of that, we also added the layer of color. I firmly believe color and icons are a different language on their own, right? So just adding green and red immediately improved the user experience. And we tested the before version where we still had credit and debit and everything was in grayscale. And we tested the new version with money in and money out in these colors. Users were able to read and understand their banking statement in half the amount of time. And the success rate of completing this task went up to 70% completion rate from 40% that we had previously on the app. So this really goes to show the importance that language and copy has on an app. Speaking of language in apps, how about button designs? Research has proven that by adding the word now to a button, the click-through rate, the conversion, goes up and skyrockets. Just think about it. Would you rather click on a button that says purchase, or would you click on a button that says buy now? Obviously, the language in the buy now button is a lot more pressing and it makes you think like, oh, maybe I'll miss out if I don't buy it now. Maybe it'll fall away later. So again, language and design is such a crucial thing in shaping how users interact with apps. Speaking of how users interact with apps, what about the visually impaired who use screen readers? What do you think is nerdy face with thick horn-rimmed glasses and buck teeth, or expressionless face, or grinning face with clenched teeth? Well, this is what people who use screen readers hear when people type an emoji. These are the emojis and their corresponding screen reader equivalents. When you use a screen reader on a page like Twitter, for instance, and people are using lots of emojis, it becomes complex. I just love investigating how internet language has shaped over the years. Using emojis is like a whole language of its own. There's a trend on Twitter now to write tweets with, a negative connotation with lots of vomiting and angry faces and downward thumbs, and then to write a positive thing with heart emojis and stars and a loving feeling. So this person doesn't like sports, but they like the baseball scene in Twilight. I don't know this. This is just screenshots from Twitter. So they've put all of these emojis. But when a screen reader goes through this, it says vomiting face, vomiting face, vomiting face, all the way sports, vomiting face. And it's not an ideal experience for someone who's using a screen reader. Again, there's another way that a Twitter trend going around now to put a clapping emoji between words that you want to emphasize. So this person says, stop breaking your own heart for someone who isn't fighting to keep yours in one piece. You can really see the expression that they're trying to get across. And visually, these emojis really have power. However, when a screen reader reads the tweet, it says, stop graphic emoji : clapping hand sign, breaking graphic emoji : clapping hand sign, your, and it goes on and on like that. I was doing a bit of research on how we can better design interfaces or better use Twitter for those who use screen readers. And the person who wrote the article said, it's okay to use maybe one or two emojis because people who use a screen reader might get a kick out of it, in her words, but we should really limit it. And it's interesting that I'm seeing a lot of app design is trying to be trendy by incorporating more emojis in their interfaces. Not talking about tweets, but maybe just apps in general. And we need to be mindful that this might not always be the most accessible experience for those using screen readers. Again, I'm so glad to know that there are institutions online who are creating guidelines for us to design for a better and more accessible internet. For example, the government of Hong Kong has a whole page about how they make their websites more accessible to screen readers. And I was really interested to learn that they have a thing that says skip to main content, which is a hidden link that only screen readers can read. And that means it skips over all of the elements on a page that are standard, like the logo or the language option buttons or the search buttons, and it just gets to the main content. When designing apps or mobile websites, designers should also focus on having clearly labeled headings. A good example of this maybe is Netflix saying, popular movies or trending now or comedy, romance. Screen readers can easily scan through that content. And then finally, alt text. This is labeling your images. Here's an example, again, from the World Wide Web Consortium. They have labeled their logo image file as Web Accessibility Initiative logo, so that when a screen reader goes through their website, it knows exactly what image this is. When I design my own website on WordPress, I also make sure to label my images with the alt text. So here's a picture of my Korean textbook and my notes, which I used in a blog post, and I made sure to put the alt text in there in case a screen reader is going through my website or the mobile version of it, that it can understand what these images are. So language and language that you hear as well is so important for the internet experience. So just some pointers for designers is always to put headings on your content. What the Hong Kong government recommended is to skip to main content, that ability, alternate text for images, or even those of you in the Polyglot community who have podcasts, always put transcripts for your podcasts. So I hope this gives us a few thinking points of how we can make a more accessible internet, a more accessible app experience as well with language and design. And maybe you will understand now that design is also a language in itself. To be understood, apps need to be translated accordingly across different markets and languages. As we saw, even in the same country like Singapore or the Philippines, humans and languages are diverse and fragmented, and designers and developers should take into consideration how best to localize for a diverse and growing mobile world. I hope that you consider next time you open an app all of the thought, hopefully, that went into designing for it, both from linguists and writers to designers and engineers who are creating these apps and mobile websites that we interact with. And I hope that we can see now that language is design, and design in itself is a language as well. Thank you so much for going on this exciting linguistic and design journey with me today. If you would like to see more of my content, you can go to lindybuetis.com, which is my blog. Thank you for watching. Bye-bye. I feel like I'm making a YouTube video and I have to say see you in the next video, but it's been an honor to be able to share with you, and I'm looking forward to any questions you have. So feel free to reach out, and I'm looking forward to the Q&A session.